There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Shawn the Bookmaniac. Welcome back to my channel and another episode of Zooming In, a series where I engage with bookish social media luminaries the world over to talk about bookish literary articles online. And how excited am I to welcome a brand new guest. This is Carina, joining us from Toronto, from the fabulous Bookstagram account, Time for Reading. Carina, welcome.
Hi, Shawn.
And Carina, tell us what you do over there on Time for Reading on Bookstagram.
I mean, I read a lot of things. I read a lot of book prize long lists. I never managed to get them finished in time, but I try. And I've really been focusing on translated lit the last year or so, which has been really wonderful because it's opened the world to me. And then probably one of the, I'm thinking about it because it's the new year. This is the third year running, I guess. I've run a big book reading challenge with the not very exciting hashtag Big Book Reading 2024. So every year it's been interesting to see like more and more people kind of coming to that challenge, and some people saying, oh, I really love reading big books, and other people coming saying, oh, I'm kind of nervous, but I'll give it a try, because the challenge says, you get to decide what's big. And then I give 4 prompts, and I said, really one for each quarter of the year is probably enough big book reading for anybody if you have other things you want to read. So it's always fun to see people's enthusiasm. It's kind of like when people start the new year and say, I'm going to run a marathon this year or something, right? It's the book equivalent of that.
It definitely is. And I am not a marathon runner as a reader, so I need to get in shape in a readerly sense to participate maybe in 2025. We are here to discuss 2 very closely related articles, and this is, I have to say, a topic very near and dear to my heart, so I'm champing at the bit to get into it. The first article is from The Walrus, early January this year. Oh, apparently it was originally published at the end of November last year. It's called The Case for Never Reading the Book Jacket by Kaja Eason. And the second article is from, it used to be known as Tor.com. Tor.com is a SF and fantasy publisher, but they have an online magazine that was just called Tor.com, but they've now changed the magazine to Reactor. Still, and this article is by the same wonderful columnist there, Molly Templeton, also published at the end of November last year. What do you want to know about a book before you read it? By Molly Templeton. So, yes, it is a nerdy reader topic close to my heart. Carina, what did you make of these articles?
Well, they were really interesting. It's definitely something you think about. And I think if you think about it when you write about books too, because you're thinking about what do people want to know about a book? What should I tell about people about a book? But also, obviously, as a reader, it's what I think about. Am I going to pick up this book? Am I going to invest my time in a book? I especially liked the second article. I like the first one. I don't think I could do what she does, where she says she doesn't even want to read the book jacket, because then you're really just going on, I guess, name and reputation of the publisher or the author, or just vibes. But I do like the book jacket blurb generally. I use it right at the very, very sort of beginning of deciding that maybe I'll read a book. So, if I see something and I think, oh, that's interesting, and I read the blurb, then that kind of goes onto my list now, my very long list of the books that I think I'm going to read. And then I don't look at it again, potentially ever. I certainly don't look at it right before I sit down to read. I like that separation so that I don't remember, because I don't really like spoilers. Usually the book jacket doesn't spoil it, but sometimes it does. So I was definitely on the same page as Molly Templeton, who wrote the second article. There's a great quote. Really, what she said about it is basically what I felt. She says that she really wants to know everything. And this is the one that's on Tor.com, so it is sort of science fiction focused. But she says, I want to know if there are fairy tales in its genes. I want to know if there are women with swords, if aging isn't viewed as a curse, if the sentences are going to draw me in or kick me out again. I want to know when I'm going to fall in love with every single member of an ensemble cast. I want to know if the goddamn dog is going to die so I cannot read that book. And I feel like that. And I want to know what happens at first, but not what happens at the end. And that was the part that I really thought was great. because that's very much the thing. Is I kind of want to know, like, is this a book? Is this a book that's for me? But don't tell me what's going to happen, because then why would I read it?
Well, very interesting. So my first comment on what you said and what your experience of these articles is, I don't think that the typical copy on the back of the book or on the inside flap of the dust jacket tells the reader any of those things, except
True.
that how it might begin.
Mhm.
I understand the need to know your own subjective version of those questions, but typically I don't think that's included on them.
I mean, I think especially to me, the line that she says about, I want to know how it begins, but I don't want to know how it ends, I think was the one that really struck me. I think the other stuff is probably the kind of stuff you'll get from reviews, but once you get to reviews, you've got to be careful, because then you might find out how it ends too, and you might not want that.
My perspective on this is almost exactly the same as the writer for The Walrus, Taja Isen, that I like to go into a book blind. I'm allergic to the synopsis on the book. I don't want to know it. I think usually I can't stand the way it's written. It's so like advertising, all those adjectives that they talk about here, that amazing. And especially if Jack Kerouac married Tana Janowitz or whatever. I can't stand any of that stuff. It's just propaganda. When I do a book haul video for my channel, I'll have the book and I'll say, and be very dramatic about it and say, looking at the synopsis with half closed eyes, I can see it's vaguely about blah blah blah, and that's all. I don't even want to know that much, but I want to give my viewers a little sense of what it's about.
How do you pick a book if you don't read the blurb? Like, if you don't have a sense of what it is from the blurb?
It's a great question. I listen to a few reviews, and if I trust the reviewer, then that's all I want to know about it before I buy the book or get my hands on the book.
Yep.
And I want only to hear enough of the review for my interest to be sparked, and then I'll stop the video, usually 2 minutes in, and say, okay, this sounds interesting. Or reading a full book review in the New York Times or whatever. I'll only read the first few sentences and think, oh, yeah, this sounds good. And then I don't want to hear anymore.
The newspapers are famous for spoiling books, I find. Like, I had to stop reading newspaper reviews because they give too much away.
And I don't like spoilers. And I don't even want to know, once I've decided that a book is interesting, then I don't even want to know what my friends thought of it. So I sometimes I'm curious enough to find out if it was positive or negative, but I don't want to know any details. I'm very easily influenced. I'm more of an influencee than an influencer, Carina. And so opinions, I just want to protect myself from all that and go in as blind as possible. I thought there was some really great sentences in the Walrus article. Let me see if I can pick one of those out. Well, here's one. Jacket copy, that's the phrase she's using for the synopsis. Yeah. Jacket copy offers neither an effective barometer for predicting what I love, nor reliable protection from buying things I regret. It is reductive, misleading, and I have decided none of my business. I like that. That's kind of how I feel.
One of the articles had started, I think it's the second one maybe, but started with a story of an author who burned all their books because they so disliked the jacket copy and felt it was so not reflective of their book that they famously, I guess, had a whole conflagration of
and made a video of it for social media. That was Janette Winterson. Yeah, the reissue of some of her early work. Yeah, I didn't ever watch the videos or know much about it, but I certainly applaud her for books with terrible jacket copy. Dazzling, brilliant, amazing. I can't stand all that stuff.
The other thing that I sort of reflected on when I was reading this, and jacket copy, of course, is one of them, but the other part of it is when they're, author blurbs on books. And some people put a lot of weight into them. I think especially when you're reading book prizes, people will say, oh, look, it was, one of the judges actually blurbed so-and-so's book. Preparing for our conversation led me down this little bit of a wormhole around reading about authors blurbing each other's books, and that often they don't even read the book. They read the first page and go, oh yeah. And you know what? Shawn's a friend, so I'll write something. And they talked about, writing sentences that say, well, if you really liked this, you'll like such and so, which isn't really their way of saying that they liked it. So kind of, a little circuitous ways of sounding positive, but not really.
I'm sure you read some of the same articles that I had a whole episode of zooming in about that exact topic, book blurbs. with Brian of Bookish, of the BookTube channel Bookish, and we talked about a couple articles about book blurbs. So I'll put a link to that video in the show notes. Although since I put that video out where both Brian and I were fairly negative about book blurbs, I have been for a long time. I think they're just silly and usually fake in some way, not authentic.
And they wreck the graphic design. So, you know.
Yes, absolutely. And I've recently had a conversation with an author, Alvin James Mensa, author of one of my favorite books from last year, Small Joys, where he said he got a blurb from one of his favorite writers. And again, he thought it was genuine. I hope it was genuine, but he was absolutely over the moon to get this blurb that his publisher sought that out. So I think sometimes they're sincere, but it's certainly a contaminated pool in general.
Yeah, they don't move me as a reader. Let's just put it that way.
In the quote from Molly Templeton that you read, there was a whole list of things that you would like to know, or you have a subjective version of that list, Carina. So how do you find out what you want to know about a book before you read it? Because like I say, I don't think a lot of that is going to be on the synopsis.
No, and I think she went into greater depth. The one that kind of struck me in that list, only because it was recently an issue for me as a reader, was the issue of like, does the dog die? Which of course there is a very important website everybody needs to know about, doesthedogdie.com, where you can look that up.
Oh.
So, and all kinds of other triggers. So it's for people who do have concerns around things that they know they'll be sensitive to when they're reading. It's actually a terrific website. But I was just recently reading Septology by this year's Nobel laureate Jan Fosse, and the character ends up having a dog, picking up a friend's dog, and he clearly is in a distracted state, and he's also hasn't had a dog, so and I have a dog, so his care for the dog just was very concerning, and I actually it became a real distraction as I read, because I started to be so worried about the dog, and I didn't end up looking it up because I don't like spoilers. I didn't want to see anything else, but it did distract me all the way through. So I think that's why I twigged on that when she wrote that in the article, because I just went through that a week ago of thinking, okay, but what's going to happen with the dog? That was a thing. And, I could answer, I guess, anybody to say, I don't know if I should say it's a spoiler.
They know where to go and look it up now, thanks to you.
Yeah,
so
they know
great.
where to go look it up. When she talks about sort of, I want to know how it's going to start. I do like to have a sense of the vibe and the feel and the sort of the genre that I'm reading. Is this going to be deep, serious literary fiction? Is it fantasy? What is it? I'm not sure. The book blurb gives me the jacket copy gives me that. And that's, so you said, where do I go? I probably now more than anything go to reviewers online, as long as I know they're spoiler free, because I tend to find it on social media. Reviewers tend to be more spoiler free than say reading a review in The Guardian.
I just put up a chat last night for this series with Scott and Nelle, a pair of wonderful Australian booktubers, and we were talking about deal breakers in reading, including in the title of the article. I think that article was by Molly Templeton too, and it was Does the Dog Die or whatever. And so, I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well, because it's all tied in together. One thing that I have never been able to relate to, and I hear some of my pretentious word, I'm going to try it on for size here, but I think it's a little pretentious. My colleagues on BookTube sometimes use when they're reviewing a book, they say, I was disappointed. I expected it was going to be blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And I just don't have expectations when I go into a book. I mean, that's obviously not true. I have expectations that I'm going to enjoy it. I have expectations that it's going to be well written, that I'm going to get invested in the characters. But in terms of anything else to do with the book, one of the reasons I don't like to read the synopsis is because I don't want to have any expectations. I just want to go in and see what I find.
It's funny. Yeah. I think in the article by Molly Templeton, she actually links to another article, which is about what if it subverts your expectations? Like you go in and then it's not what you thought it was. What do you do? Kind of thing. And there have been a couple of situations where I, as I said, I kind of read the book jacket or that copy and have a sense of, okay, this is a book I want to read. I put it on a list. I might not get to it for 6 months or a year or whatever. And I don't reread that, but I've gotten in partway into a book. And then I have actually gone back to the book jacket because it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. So, I'm reading along. I didn't think that this is what this was about. And I do. Then I go back, and sometimes I'm right that they didn't really signal that that's what it was going to be about. And sometimes it was there, but because I didn't have the context of the rest of the book, I didn't sort of, it had nowhere to land in my mind. So it slipped away. And then I'm in the middle of the book and I say, oh, okay, well, that surprises me. It's not what I thought it would be. So
Here's a sentence from the Walrus article. How much more would you get out of a book if you submitted to the pleasure of figuring out its internal logic as you went along rather than memorizing the map or you even set out? So, yeah. And then the concluding paragraph, and I'm going to read it in full. It's very short. Widen the channels by which you let titles into your life. Pick up a book because you like the cover, or you trust the publisher, or you think the author's hot. Pick it up for the city where it's set, or the literary trend it's supposedly part of, or the language it was translated from. There are so many more rewarding, representative ways to choose a book than the stew of adjectives on the back. I went, yes.
Yeah, it's interesting when that she referred to cover, because I don't know if you've had a book chat about cover art in general, because that's such a fascinating topic. And it's funny because I brought a couple books up with me for our chat.
Carina, this was a wonderful chat. I hope you'll come back.
I'd love to. Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.